Good morning, Mets fans, and welcome to a Tuesday edition of Driving with Mr. Met. Last night, the Mets kicked off a potentially season-deciding series with the Arizona Diamondbacks, and what better way to do it than with Jacob deGrom on the mound? And formula for success, Jake to Seth equals W. That's correct. deGrom 7, Lugo 2, Mets win. I'm going to talk about the game. I'm going to talk about another historic feat from Pete Alonso and talk about tonight's second game in the four-game series on today's show. Jacob deGrom is a delight. There's just no getting around it. I mean, there's no one that's more fun to watch pitch. Especially when he doesn't have his best stuff, and last night he was locked in. I mean, he was really, really good. Another double-digit strikeout performance from deGrom. I think he now reclaims the National League lead for strikeouts. He continues to keep himself in the top 2 or 3 for the Cy Young with every performance. I mean, you take that one quote-unquote stinker against the Cubs out, and it's only a stinker by deGrom's standards. We gave up the 4 runs, but you take that off the table, dude, he has been impeccable, and it's just, like I said, it's just a delight to watch. And, last night's formula was the recipe for success, not just for the team when deGrom starts, but in general. And I've been saying this for a while, they got to ride the starting pitching. And, I mean, everybody's been saying it because you can see it. The one glaring weakness this team has, hands down, is the bullpen. So logic tells you don't use the bullpen for more than a couple of outs if you can avoid it. And look, sometimes you can't avoid it, right? Sometimes you have the Syndergaard rando clunker where, he throws, gives up 10 runs in 3 innings. That sort of shit happens. You have no choice but to make it a bullpen game. I mean, that sucks. But outside of that, you got to push these starters to 7 innings every time. I don't care how many pitches they've thrown. All right, unless it's an egregious number of pitches, they got to pitch more than 5 innings, because if you rely on this bullpen to get you more than 6 outs, you're gambling right there. You're playing with fire, and you are going to get burned. And the Mets have shown that repeatedly this year. Last night was the example of how it works when it's supposed to work correctly. So deGrom pitches 7 beautiful innings. Lugo comes in, closes it out, finishes it off. And, it's just a damn shame that Lugo has this elbow issue where he cannot pitch more than back-to-back games. It really does take him off the table as the closer for this team, because, look, the reality is a closer has to be able to work back-to-back days, sometimes back-to-back days. And especially when your team is playing tight games all the time, the closers relied on more than they are on a different kind of team. So, as much as I love Seth Lugo and what he's able to do out of the bullpen, he is an absolute weapon out of the bullpen, hands down. But he cannot be relied on to give you more than, 3 appearances, maybe 4 tops in a week. Not the 4 tops, but 4 maximum of 4 appearances in a week. And that's just not going to cut it when you've got a guy who's this good, who's this important. And so, one of the topics I'm going to talk about after the season is over is, how do the Mets fix this bullpen problem that they have? And I don't know that I have the answer, but I want to try to think about it a little bit. And Seth Lugo is going to be a key part to it, because whether he stays in the bullpen, or if you listen to Mike Silva's podcast from Sunday, the suggestion to move him to the rotation, it's not a bad one. It really isn't, because then you can sort of have him in that set routine. The problem with that, of course, is the glaring hole it leaves in the bullpen. So anyway, we're going to get to that at a later date after the Mets win the World Series. But for now, I want to talk more about last night's game. Home runs in last night's game. Pete Alonso hits not 1 but 2 of them to take sole possession of the Major League lead in home runs. He's now got 47 on the season. He's 5 shy of Aaron Judge's rookie record that was set 2 years ago. I'm sorry, but as long as Pete stays on the field, he's breaking that record. And he's going to set a bar for future Mets rookies that, unless they juice the ball even more, it's going to be really tough to surpass. I'm going to predict that he's going to finish the season with 55. I said it like 4 weeks ago that he was going to break Judge's record, and I stand by that. I'm saying 55 is going to be his final total. Alonso did break another record last night for the Mets, his 34th consecutive game where he's been on base. That breaks a record that was previously held by Darryl Strawberry. So another feather in the cap for Pete Alonso in this season. Just a remarkable season. I do a Game Ball and Goats thread blog post after every game, or at least I award them for every game. Sometimes I don't get to post them until a day or two after, and I have to bundle a couple of them together. But regardless, I've been handing out faux Game Balls and faux Goat awards to the most and least valuable players on a per game basis, and Pete Alonso has 42 Game Balls. And it's crazy. I've said it multiple times on this show this year, but it's crazy to think that there was debate whether he would start the season with the team. It is completely crazy to think about that. And to think that it's not even close that he has been the most valuable player on this team. And if he continues the pace that he's on right now with the hot hitting streak that he's on, I'm not talking about a consecutive game hitting streak, but I'm just talking about his clutch hitting, his knack for coming up big in the big spot. He's going to put himself into the consideration for the MVP conversation. He's not going to win the MVP. He's got the Rookie of the Year in the bag. I don't care what anybody else does right now. He is the Rookie of the Year, period. If he doesn't win it by some miracle, it will be a travesty, and I'll look at those awards the same way I look at the Oscars, which is I don't care anymore. So, but as far as the MVP goes, Pete Alonso's performance this year is most valuable player worthy. There are just other players in the league on teams like the Braves, Freddie Freeman, man, like the Nationals, Anthony Rendon. These guys are having unbelievable seasons. So I think that Alonso's name is going to be discussed. He might even wind up in the top 5, perhaps top 6. But he certainly isn't going to win the award. But just the fact that as a rookie, he's in the conversation, that's awesome. And I'm just so happy for him. Another home run hit in last night's game was by Wilmer Flores. Not for the Mets, for the Diamondbacks. It was the sole run that crossed the plate for Arizona. I was a little bit emotional watching Wilmer come to the plate in another team's uniform. The closest thing that I could say it sort of felt like was the Piazza game, where he came back with the Padres in 06. And then hit 2 home runs against the Mets and almost hit a third. So it not the same, obviously. I mean, what Piazza did for this franchise and what Wilmer did aren't anywhere near on the same level. But Wilmer will always have that special place in most Mets fans' hearts, especially the ones that have hearts. There are a number of folks on Mets Twitter who despise Wilmer Flores. My cousin hates Wilmer Flores. She hates that he cried on the field. That to me, that just endeared him more to me, because I watching him do that in the moment in 4 years ago, 4 years ago last month actually, watching him do that in the moment was linked him with us as fans forever, because that's how we feel as fans watching the game. We feel the same emotion that he feels. So, it was awesome that Wilmer was back. The other part that was fantastic, I mean, Jacob deGrom is a full-blown machine on the mound. I mean, he is the Terminator, right? The deGrominator, if you will. And when Wilmer came up in the for his first at-bat in the top of the second, and the crowd, the small crowd, not a huge crowd at the game, a little bit disappointing there, but the crowd gave him a real nice ovation. And Wilmer tipped his cap, took his helmet off and sort of waved to the crowd. And as he's putting his helmet back on, of course, he looks out at the mound and he gives deGrom a wink. And I got to give SNY's camera work credit here. They caught the wink crystal clear, and then they immediately cut to deGrom's reaction. And to see Jake smirk on the mound, like while he's working, Ron Darling even commented about it. It was really funny. I mean, to see Jake's reaction to Wilmer and kind of like give that smirk, but then immediately reset, like put his head down and be like, you're the enemy now. That was great. It was just such a great moment. And I'm glad that Wilmer got his home run, and I'm glad that the Diamondbacks lost in the end. So, Mets take the first game of the series tonight. They've got to sweep this series. At the very least, they've got to take 3 out of 4. So that continues this evening. Zach Wheeler on the mound for the Mets, facing Zach Godley. I think that's his name. I probably got that wrong or something. I don't care, whatever. Some pitcher for the Diamondbacks who's also named Zach, but spells it with an H instead of with a K. It is Zach Godley, I think. But anyway, Wheeler on the mound for the Mets. Need Wheeler to come up big, and he's done it a few times this year. For as many poor performances Wheeler's thrown out there, he's also thrown out some really good ones. So hopefully tonight is a good one, and the Mets can ride that pitching performance to another victory, and avoid the bullpen. That is the key. So I'll be back tomorrow to talk about tonight's game, recap it, and continue the conversation as the Mets make this improbable push toward a potential wild card bid in 2019. Until then, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at Mr_Met. And as always, let's go Mets.